Asterix and the Secret Weapon. Once upon a time, in the year 50 BC, the country we now know as France was called Gaul. And Gaul was in trouble, because it was occupied by the Roman army under the famous commander Julius Caesar. Caesar had conquered all Gaul. All Gaul? Well, not quite all, because in Armorica, now called Brittany, one small village of indomitable Gauls was still holding out against the Roman invaders. Julius Caesar felt furious whenever he thought about it. He had built 4 fortified camps around the village: Aquarium, Laudanum, Totorum, and Compendium, and they were bristling with Roman soldiers under orders to capture that last little village. Yet somehow they could never manage it. Asterix was the greatest hero in the village. He didn't look much of a hero. He was rather small and skinny, but his cunning made up for that. He was always picked for the most dangerous missions, along with his inseparable friend Obelix. Obelix was strong and extremely large, and, to be honest, rather fat, although he insisted that he was just well built. But he was very kind-hearted and devoted to his little dog called Dogmatix, who went everywhere with Asterix and Obelix. The village chieftain was Vital Statistics. His vital statistics were actually rather bigger than he could have wished, but a chieftain didn't get much chance for exercise because it was beneath his dignity to walk about like ordinary folk. He had to be carried on a ceremonial shield by 2 porters. Vital Statistics feared nothing except that the sky might fall on his head tomorrow. But, as he said, tomorrow never comes. And meanwhile he was good at governing the village and making sure the villagers kept on outwitting Julius Caesar. The reason why they could always outwit him was their secret weapon, a magic potion brewed by Getafix, the venerable village druid. The potion gave anyone who drank it superhuman strength, for a limited period of time. Another important villager was Cacophonix the Bard, who was also the village schoolteacher. Every Gaulish village was supposed to have a bard to sing songs and play the lyre. Unfortunately, Asterix's village happened to have the worst bard in all Gaul. But so long as Cacophonix kept his mouth shut and didn't play the lyre, everybody liked him. Or everybody usually liked him, because Cacophonix was part of the reason why all was not well in the Gaulish village when this story begins. You could tell all was not well because even the children were cross with each other. Cacophonix had sent them off for playtime in the break period at school, and a whole lot of little boys were ganging up on a little girl who wanted to join their game of soldiers. "Go away," said the leader of the boys' gang. His father was the village fishmonger, Unhygienix, and he had borrowed a grown-up's winged helmet to make him look big and tough. "Go away! Girls can't play," he lisped, which rather spoilt the tough guy effect. So did the way the helmet kept slipping down over his eyes. "So why can't I play?" said the little girl defiantly, putting her hands on her hips. She was the daughter of the village blacksmith, Fully Automatics. "Ever seen a girlie fighting Caesar's legions?" asked the fishmonger's son. "Anyway, girls are always crying," said one of his friends. "No, they aren't," said the little girl, bursting into tears. "Mummy!" she yelled. Her mother came running up and glared at the little boys. "What's the idea, upsetting little girls?" she asked. "Oh, yes, I suppose it's all my fault now," said the leader of the gang gloomily. "Like father, like son," snapped Mrs. Fully Automatics. "Your dad upsets the whole village with his rotten fish." Unhygienix was sensitive about his fish. He was holding one of them when he came along to see what the children were quarrelling about, just in time to hear what Mrs. Fully Automatics had said. "Look here, missus," he shouted indignantly. "If I was your husband, I'd—" But he never finished his sentence, because Fully Automatics himself came marching up. Fully Automatics was so strong that he could forge metal with his bare hands. But he had a hammer, too, a big one, and he was holding it in a rather threatening way. "Oh, yes, Unhygienix," he said. If you were her husband, you'd what? Next moment the two fathers were having a tremendous punch-up, biffing each other with the hammer and the fish. By now, Unhygienic's son was ready to make up the quarrel. "Oh, all right, you can come and play with it," he told the little girl graciously. "No, it's too late," said the blacksmith's daughter. "Don't want to play with you any more." And she walked away with her arms folded, looking very demure. "Oh, I ask you," said the fishmonger's son crossly. Usually, the people of the Gaulish village were good friends, so when even the children were quarrelling, it was definitely a sign that something was wrong. Little did Cacophonix the bard know that he was the source of the trouble, but he was about to find out. He glanced up at the sun above the trees where he had nailed a board saying school, and decided it was time the children started lessons again. "Come along, children," he called. "Break's over." And he began banging a gong. Even the gong he was banging sounded out of tune. And since he was such a hopeless bard, the village mothers had worked out that he probably wasn't much good as a teacher either, and they'd been planning a change. It was time to tell Cacophonix. When the children came back for lessons, the mothers came with them. "We've decided to remove our children from this school," Mrs. Fully Automatics told the bard. "It has a poor reputation. What's more," another mother told him, "we've appointed a new teacher from Lutetia. She's going to look after our children's education now. Especially their musical education," added Mrs. Fully Automatics. This was too much for poor Cacophonix. "Allow me to remind you, madam," he said frostily, "that only druids and bards are qualified to be teachers." As a matter of fact, that was the general rule, and women were not allowed to be bards or druids. But these days some people were getting other ideas. "Oh, so a woman can't be a bard?" said Mrs. Fully Automatics ominously. "No, ma'am," shouted Cacophonix furiously. "She's barred from being a bard." "That's just too bad," Mrs. Fully Automatics shouted back, losing her own temper. "Take that!" And she slapped the bard's face. "Keep your hands to yourself, ma'am," Cacophonix yelled. They were now making such a noise that they could be heard almost all over the village. Asterix certainly heard them as he was sweeping the cobblestones outside his hut. So did his friend Obelix, who happened to be strolling by, an impressive sight in his outsized striped blue and white breeches, with a large menhir behind his back and a look of mild surprise on his face. "Hear that, Obelix?" Asterix asked his friend. "No holds barred by the sound of it." Next moment Cacophonix the bard came up to them, seething with rage. "Not only do they all thump me at the drop of a lyre," he complained, "now they're bringing in a foreign female to replace me. Oh, well, that's it. I'm leaving the village, and then you'll all be sorry." As a matter of fact, they really would be sorry. Cacophonix might not be much good as either a bard or a schoolteacher, but the villagers were very fond of him. "Poor old Cacophonix," said Asterix, worried. "He really seems to mean it. Oh, I better go and tell Chief Vital Statistics." And he put his winged helmet on and hurried off to the chief's hut. When Asterix came hurrying in with his news, Chief Vital Statistics was sitting in his ceremonial chair on top of his ceremonial shield. He'd been talking to the druid Getafix, but they interrupted their conversation to hear what Asterix had to say. "Terrible news, Chief Vital Statistics," gasped Asterix. "Cacophonix is planning to leave us over a woman bard." "You mean he's in love?" asked the chief in surprise. No, but he's all upset to think a woman from outside our village is coming to take over from him," said Asterix. "Don't worry, Asterix," said the chief comfortably. "I have every faith in us. I'm sure we'll see this woman bard off in double quick time." However, the druid was worried too. "Oh, dear me, we really must persuade our friend Cacophonix to stay," he said. "He's excellent company, so long as he doesn't sing." Soon the leading villagers had formed a delegation. They went to the bard's hut, a tree-top house on a platform, and arrived just in time to meet him coming down the tree with a bundle over his shoulder. "Cacophonix, don't go," Vital Statistics begged him. "The whole village is asking you not to leave." Cacophonix was not impressed. Farewell, you ungrateful lot. I am retiring to my little bijou residence in the forest to meditate on man's ingratitude, said the bard loftily, and he turned his back and went out through the village gates. The delegation turned back dejectedly. "How sad to see our bard leave the village," said Asterix, with his moustache and even the wings on his helmet drooping.
"You're right," agreed the chief. "There's not always the best who are taken."
At this point the friends heard a voice behind them. It was a loud voice, it was a stranger's voice, and it was a woman's voice at that. "Is this the village of loonies?" it said cheerfully. They all whipped round. Behind them stood a woman they'd never seen before. She wore blue leggings with horizontal paler blue stripes and a red tunic. Her hair was in a pigtail tied up on top of her head, and she carried a very large bag over her shoulder. The bag looked as if it held a musical instrument. So this must be the new bard and teacher.
"Looks like it's not always the best to replace them either," muttered the chief. "What does she mean, village of loonies? Madam," he added, raising his voice, "I am the chieftain of this village. Kindly moderate your language. Village of loonies, indeed."
"Sorry, but that's how they've been describing you everywhere I asked on the way from Lutetia," said the newcomer. Ever since Obelix set eyes on her, he'd been having a fit of the giggles, while Asterix tried to shush him. This remark made him giggle even harder. Well, it was really very rude of him, and Asterix snapped, "Oh, shut up, do!"
"So, you're the woman bard, are you?"
said Chief Vital Statistics, doubtfully.
What do we call you? Bardess? Bardette?"
"Just bard will do nicely," said the new arrival, glaring at Obelix. "My name is Bravura, and you can tell your hysterical friend to stop that silly giggling, or I shall lose my temper." By now Obelix could restrain himself no longer. He was falling about, laughing. "Oh, please forgive my friend," said Asterix politely. "He's never seen a woman wearing breeches before." "You ignorant rustics," snapped Bravura. "Don't you know that leggings like these are the latest fashion in Lutetia?"
"No, it isn't that,"
gasped Obelix, still helpless with laughter.
It's because everyone knows it's vertical stripes that are slimming, and yours are horizontal. Oh, dear me, oh, dear me."
He started giggling again. The stripes on his own breeches, needless to say, were vertical. Bravura wasn't exactly willowy, but she was a lot slimmer than Obelix, and she resented his remarks. "Right, fatso," she challenged him. "Let's see if you're as hot on mathematics as aesthetics. Say your 3 times table."
Easy," said Obelix. 1 times 3 is Asterix, dogmatics and me, but 3 times balls makes a lot more on the table, of course."
Asterix and Vital Statistics weren't sure what to make of this, but Bravura knew it was nonsense. "Right," she said grimly, poking Obelix in the middle of his large blue-striped tummy. "I aim to raise the educational standards of this entire village, and not just the children. I expect to see you and your vertical stripes in my class tomorrow. Get it?"
"But I can't," said Obelix, taken aback. "I mean, I've got many years to deliver." "Obelix, please don't complicate things," the chief begged as the new teacher strode off. And now it was Asterix's turn to have a fit of the giggles as he thought of his enormous friend having to go back to school.
Outside the chief's hut, Bravura found several of the village ladies waiting for her in a welcoming committee. "Oh, we've been looking forward to meeting you so much, ma'am," said the chief's wife. "I'm Impedimenta, wife of Chief Vital Statistics, and meet Mrs. Unhygienics, Mrs. Fully Automatics, and Mrs. Geriatrics." Mrs. Geriatrics was the wife of Geriatrix, the village's oldest inhabitant. She herself was young, blonde, and beautiful, and Geriatrix was very proud of her. "No need to stand on ceremony," said the new bard briskly. "Just call me Bravura." We're holding a little party for you this evening, Impedimenta told her, to introduce you to the villagers. You may find them a bit rustic, but they're full of fun.
So I saw back there by the gate, said Bravura frostily. Well, where's my official residence?
Your official residence? Oh, yes, of course, said Impedimenta, baffled for a moment. She hadn't stopped to think where the new bard was going to live.
Why not use Cacophonix's hut? Said the fishmonger's wife, Bacteria. It ought to suit a musician, and Cacophonix has left. Well, he didn't know the score.
Yes, he got the wind up, agreed Mrs. Geriatrix. So it's all yours, no strings attached, decided Impedimenta. Let's take you to see it, she added. Oh, you must be worn out walking all the way here from Lutetia.
I don't hitch lifts, said Bravura. You never know what male chauvinist pig you may meet.
Oink, said a puzzled village pig who happened to be strolling down the road. Soon the ladies reached the bard's hut on its treetop platform. There, said Impedimenta, pointing. It's rather a claim, but the air's very pure up there.
Not bad,
Bravura rather grudgingly agreed, and she climbed up and began settling in. Back in the chief's hut, Vital Statistics heard from his wife about the party for Bravura.
A party in honour of that female bard, he snorted. Ha! Honestly.
Oh, I see, said Impedimenta crossly, standing on a stool to straighten his cloak. Just for once we welcome a person of quality and education to our village, and Mr. Vital Statistics objects. Oh, I dare say he'd prefer the boring company of those coarse, uncultivated boors who chose him as chief, she added, polishing up his helmet vigorously.
Oh, listen, Pedimento dear,
the chief began. And stop shortening my name like that, his wife snapped. It's common and ridiculous. She took her husband's arm and walked out into the village with him. Then she noticed something.
Oh, where's your shield of office, then? One of my shield-bearers has let me down, tired out, and the other flatly refuses to carry me alone, said Vital Statistics gloomily. If you ask me, I need a spare shield-bearer.
You certainly do, Impedimenta agreed. That shield is always breaking down at just the wrong moment, like now, when I really want us to impress Bravura. Soon the party was in full swing. A long table had been set up under the trees, with a banner above it saying, "Welcome to our new bard." The table was covered with a spotless white cloth and garlanded with flowers, and there were dainty little cakes and sandwiches to eat. The women gathered at one end of the table, while the men kept themselves to themselves at the other end. Asterix helped himself to a sandwich, hoping it might be filled with wild boar, but it wasn't. He gave it to Dogmatics. All the ladies were eager to hear about life in the capital city of Gaul. "Oh, do tell us about gay Lutetia, dear Bravura," gushed Impedimenta. "I hear it's becoming a great city."
"Yes, it certainly is capital,"
agreed Bravura, enjoying all the attention. "What are the summer fashions like this year?" asked the beautiful Mrs. Geriatrix eagerly.
"I wonder if those new-fangled leggings would flatter my figure," said a rather plump lady in a powder-blue dress.
The honest answer would have been no, but fortunately no one said so. And anyway, just then the women decided it was time for some music from their new bard. "A song!" they cried. "Oh, yes, Bravura dear, do sing us one of your odes," begged Mrs. Geriatrix. Bravura went up to her hut, once Cacophonix's hut, and soon came back with the instrument she'd been carrying in that large bundle of hers. It wasn't a lyre like Cacophonix's favourite instrument, or a harp, or even a wind instrument such as the carnix, an ancient Gaulish trumpet. It was a large drum slung around her neck, with a big drumstick to play it. Bravura gave her audience a little talk on modern music before she began performing.
"The harp and the carnix are just for early music fans now," she told them. "Only percussion can drum modern lyric poetry into an audience these days," she went on. "Now just you listen to this."
And she opened her mouth, raised her drumstick, and began to play and sing. It was amazing. She sang very loudly. She sang as badly out of tune as Cacophonix, and she banged a big drum for all she was worth. Impedimenta and the other women, who had been expecting a nice, quiet, refined song to some ladylike instrument such as the harp, goggled at her in astonishment. "America, America, Tatatis shed his grace on thee," Bravura warbled. Tutatis, by the way, was the principal god of the ancient Gauls. "America, the beautiful," she went on crescendo, still beating the drum. It was all too much for Vital Statistics, Asterix, and the other men. To think this was the bard who had been invited to replace Cacophonix, and she was just as bad at music as he was. They fell about laughing. They couldn't help it. "No, no, gentlemen," Getafix the druid tried to calm them. "Live and let live, you know." But he couldn't keep up the good manners any longer. He did try to stifle his own laughter, but it was no good. At last Bravura realized that she was not getting the audience reaction she expected. She stopped singing and strode off, saying crossly, "Philistines! Rustic boors! I'm wasted on that lot." "Oh, dear," fluttered Impedimenta, scuttling after her. "Oh, don't take any notice of them, Bravura. It was very nice, you know." She finished rather feebly. "I know it was very nice," said Bravura grimly. "What I don't know is how you and the other women can put up with these retarded barbarian husbands of yours." "They do like a joke," Impedimenta admitted, "but they mean well." "You can all come and see me tomorrow after the children have finished school," Bravura said firmly, "and I'll tell you about woman's place in Gaulish society today." Whether that was a threat or a promise, at least night brought peace and calm. A peace and calm broken only by the snoring of the village cockerel, who had trouble with his adenoids anyway, and was then suddenly woken by the loud voice of Bravura, who had decided to do some music and singing practice. "Where girls are so pretty," she sang, and boom, boom went her drum. "I fell asleep, and sweet Molly on my lunas, she wheeled away barrow through our streets broad and narrow." Boom, boom went the drum. "Cock-a-doodle-doo!" cried the cockerel, roused from his slumbers long before dawn.
"And you call that a person of quality and education?"
the chief asked his wife, sitting up in bed. "So," said Impedimenta defensively, "bards don't clock-watch, do they? Bards have their musical genius to consider." A number of the Gauls, including Asterix, Obelix, Geriatrix, and Dogmatix, were also considering Bravura's musical genius, if that's what it was. They rather thought it wasn't. "Through our streets broad and narrow," caroled the new bard. Boom, boom went the drum. Asterix gave his considered verdict on the music. "Much the same as Cacophonix, except it isn't raining," he said. For Cacophonix sang so badly he could make it rain. His friends had taken him along on a mission to the exotic East on purpose to start a monsoon. What with all the singing and the drumming and the cockerel crowing, no one saw the chief slink out of his house with an axe. Nor did anyone hear the chop-chop of the axe at the foot of the tree with the bard's tree-top house in its branches, until suddenly Bravura uttered a particularly tuneless shriek. The tree lurched and fell with a mighty crash, taking house, bard, and all with it.
"Ah! Oh, good,"
said Chief Vital Statistics with satisfaction, making for the safety of his bed again.
"Oh, good. She was really getting me down."
"Getting you down?" a voice yelled after him. Bravura had emerged from the hut and was peering over the edge of the platform.
"I saw who did that, you male chauvinist boor."
Little Dogmatix was upset too. He hated to see trees chopped down. He opened his mouth and howled, "Hurrah!"
"Oh, don't cry, Dogmatix,"
Obelix comforted his pet.
I'll ask Getafix to make that tree grow again by magic. I'll ask him tomorrow morning when things have quietened down.
But tomorrow morning things had not quietened down in the Gaulish village. Feathers had been ruffled, and not only the feathers of the adenoidal cockerel. Bravura was looking distinctly grim as she banged the gong to summon the children to school, while she tried to ignore the Gaulish villagers making remarks they thought very funny.
"Our bard looks crotchety this morning,"
said one villager, laughing like anything at his own musical joke as he strolled by.
"Yeah, she fell flat,
said his friend, laughing even harder at his own joke. But all the grown-ups had gone by the time the children turned up for lessons. All the grown-ups, that is, except for Obelix, who had been told he had to go back to school too. Asterix was cheerfully saying goodbye.
I'm off to hunt wild boar, Obelix. I'll leave you to your lessons.
He did try not to grin, but somehow he couldn't help letting out a chuckle. Bravura wasn't chuckling when she saw that Obelix had brought Dogmatix along.
"Pets are forbidden in school,"
she said. Dogmatix was quite upset. So was Obelix.
"But he isn't too old a dog to learn new tricks," he protested.
"I said pets are forbidden in school."
Dogmatix growled. It took a lot to make him growl at a person, but this time he did it.
"Oh, there now, you've gone and upset him,"
said Obelix reproachfully.
"Never mind, Dogmatix. You wait here outside school for me. I'll tell you all about it."
"And what, may I ask, is that?"
asked Bravura, prodding the bundle over Obelix's shoulder as they walked towards the school children, leaving poor little Dogmatix behind.
"My lunch bundle,"
said Obelix defensively.
"I hope that's not forbidden too."
Bravura couldn't say it was, although it did look very much as if it held a bristly wild boar. But now she had to start teaching the children, not to mention Obelix.
"Right," she said. "We're going to say our V times table together."
V meant 5 in Roman numerals.
"All together now. I times V is V. I times V is X. I times V is—"
Here one of the children interrupted.
Miss,
he shrieked.
"Please, miss, Obelix is trying to get at my lunch bundle."
When Bravura looked around, she saw that Obelix's own lunch bundle was empty. She held it up, looking accusingly at him.
"Well, I was only going to have a taste of his lunch, that's all,"
said Obelix.
"Right," Bravura told him. "You will carve out 100 times. I must not get at someone else's lunch bundle."
So all was really far from well in the Gaulish village, and the Gauls would have been feeling worse if they had known what was being planned at that very moment in Rome. For now the Romans had a secret weapon too. Julius Caesar's aide, the patrician Manlius Clapamomnibus, had thought it up. Clapamomnibus was a rather stout, bald, spindly-legged Roman who had lost most of his hair. Nothing much to look at, but if you were a patrician in those days, it meant you were of noble birth and important. Julius Caesar had summoned him to discuss the secret weapon.
"Well, Clapamomnibus, how are you doing with that very special century you were going to recruit?"
asked Caesar. A century was a unit of the Roman army, originally consisting of 100 soldiers and commanded by a centurion.
"Is ready to go, Caesar," said Clapamomnibus, bowing low. "Your new secret weapon merely awaits your orders to embark."
Caesar leaned forward in his chair and spoke in hushed, confidential tones.
"I don't want any witnesses to this business, understand?
No witnesses."
"Every precaution will be taken, O Caesar,"
his aide assured him.
"Because if the existence of your century become known," Caesar went on, "I should be vulnerable to my enemies in the Senate and the laughingstock of all Rome. So watch it."
Manlius Clapamomnibus gulped and hurried off to complete his preparations. Soon afterwards, a Roman ship carrying Caesar's mysterious secret weapon set sail for Gaul. Although, as the weapon was hidden below decks, we shall have to wait a little longer to know exactly what it was. Meanwhile, with no idea of what Caesar was plotting either, Asterix was hunting boar in the forest. Oh, it's a shame poor old Obelix couldn't come on this hunt too, he thought. And when, in pursuit of a nice fat boar, he spotted a patrol of Roman soldiers, he felt even sorrier for his friend, because thumping Romans was something Obelix enjoyed almost as much as eating roast boar. When the Romans saw Asterix taking a drink from the gourd of magic potion he always carried with him, they knew what that meant, and they turned and ran, but not fast enough. He'd caught up with them long before they reached the fortified camp of Aquarium. When the patrol arrived back in camp, battered, bruised, and with their uniforms in tatters, it was all too obvious that they had failed miserably to conquer anyone. Their centurion tore them off a strip. "By Jupiter! Anyone would think all Gaul had been trampling over you lot," he said in disgust. "That's certainly what it felt like, centurion," said one of the soldiers feelingly. "We bumped into a boar," another soldier explained. "And that little stinker from the village of the indomitable Gauls," added a third soldier. Their centurion felt more sympathetic. He had once been on the receiving end of Asterix and the magic potion himself. "Well, bear up, boys," he told his men. "Rome has promised to send our relief soon." Meanwhile, back in the Gaulish village, the bard Bravura was lecturing the Gaulish ladies, although not everyone was attending. For instance, the woman who had admired Bravura's leggings was trying on a pair of her husband's breeches for size. Most of the others, however, were fascinated by what the bard was saying. "Friends, sisters, countrywomen," she urged them, "throw off your chains. Free yourselves from slavery. Swell the ranks of those who refuse to accept masculine tyranny." At this point, Bravura realized there had been a persistent tapping noise going on for some time. She got down from a platform and went to investigate. The noise turned out to be coming from Obelix, who was tapping away at a huge stone slab with a hammer and chisel. "Hello? You still here, Obelix?" said Bravura, startled.
"Of course," said Obelix gloomily. "Didn't you tell me to carve out 100 times that I mustn't go a bundle on someone else's lunch?"
Bravura had in fact forgotten, and didn't particularly want one of the men listening. "All right," she said kindly. "You can give school a miss this time."
Yes, miss. Thank you, miss,"
said Obelix happily. And he and Dogmatix practically danced all the way into the village, where a delicious smell was wafting out of Asterix's house. "You're just in time, Obelix," said his friend. "Dinner's ready. Guess what? It's boar."
What's in a name?" said Obelix cheerfully. "That which we call a boar by any other name would smell as sweet."
"Goodness me," said Asterix in surprise. "Blank verse now, is it? School must agree with you."
"Oh, that's all over,"
said Obelix, happily sitting down to scrunch up a whole roast boar.
"She told me to give school a miss, so I give miss to the village ladies for their evening classes."
"Evening classes?" said Asterix, suddenly feeling suspicious. What evening classes?"
"No idea,"
said Obelix. Bravura certainly needn't have worried that he would give an accurate version of what she'd been saying.
Well, something about throwing up champagne and freeing the slave to quell the pranks of those who produce, except I forget what."
Asterix looked very thoughtful. He could work some of it out, like the bit about throwing off your chains, and it made him even more suspicious of the new bard. After dinner, he went to find the druid Getafix and tell him the kind of thing he thought Bravura was telling the village ladies. "Getafix, I'm afraid vital statistics may be right. I think this Bravura is trying to sow discord in our village." No, Asterix," said the druid, a kindly soul. "Let's not judge hastily." But Asterix was right, and it was too late to do anything much about it. As he and the druid walked through the village, they saw several of the women coming out of their houses wearing breeches or leggings. Bacteria, the fishmonger's wife, was shouting at Unhygienix, "And from now on you can sell your rotten fish by yourself." When she emerged from her house, she was wearing a pair of pink leggings with red spots, and she was still furious. "Fancy Unhygienix saying these reminded him of when he had measles as a boy," she fumed. Geriatrix's wife had put her husband's breeches on. He was calling plaintively after her,
What am I going to do without my breeches? The dishes, Geriatrix, dear, the dishes,
said Mrs. Geriatrix sweetly, strolling away. And out of the blacksmith's house came his wife and his daughter. Mrs. Fully Automatics was wearing blue leggings with white spots, and her daughter's leggings were pink. It seemed that the little girl didn't like them. She was howling.
Want my prettinesses! Don't want to look like the nasty boys! You're as reactionary as your father,
said her mother crossly. There, get a fix, said Asterix. What did I say just now? The Druid had to admit his suspicions had been justified. Yes, we'd better go and discuss this with Chief Vital Statistics, he said. But when they reached the chieftain's hut, they found trouble there too. Impedimenta was just coming out of the door, being carried by two of the other village women on her husband's ceremonial shield. We have to go and tell that bard she's redundant before things get any worse, said the Druid, really worried by now. She must leave the village.
I can think of only one warrior brave enough to break the news, said Chief Vital Statistics solemnly.
Who? Said Asterix.
You, of course,
said the chief. Oh, no, begged Asterix, although he had never been afraid to face a Roman patrol. Why does it always have to be me? I'm no braver than the next man, honest. I really don't think I'm cut out for this sort of thing. But it was no use. The others wouldn't listen. In fact, although they tried not to show it, they thought it was rather funny to see the usually fearless Asterix so terrified at the thought of confronting Bravura.
Be firm and unyielding, Asterix,
the chief urged him, waving goodbye as he set off on his mission, muttering, Why did it have to be me? I'm a bachelor. I don't have a wife to make trouble. None of this has anything to do with me. Oh, sometimes, he thought as he approached the village school, sometimes I really envy Cacophonix, living all by himself in the middle of the forest. Bravura was just shutting up the school and putting up a notice saying, Tonight, Gaulish Women's Movement Workshop. Plucking up his courage, Asterix approached her. Ma'am, I've been sent to tell you, he began. Ah, good, said Bravura cheerfully, interrupting. You're the little fellow who isn't afraid of the big boys, she told the astonished Asterix, slapping him on his back. I wanted a word with you myself. You know, I like you. Well, the thing is, I have to tell you, Asterix tried again, scurrying along beside Bravura as she walked down the road. They say you're a bachelor, so I expect you live alone, said the bard. Yes, though sometimes I share my hut with Obelix when he's at a loose end, said the puzzled Asterix. Why'd you ask? Well, you know my own tree-top house got chopped down last night, said Bravura. While I'm waiting for it to be rebuilt, I thought you could lend me yours, and you stay with your friend Obelix for a while. What do you say? For a moment, Asterix was lost for words. Then, as the full horror of this awful suggestion sank in, he yelled furiously, Yeah, never! Get the idea? Nothing do it, never! By Belisama, said Bravura, laughing. Belisama was the chief goddess of the ancient Gauls. Why, what a proud, angry little Gaul he is! And to Asterix's utter horror, she took him under the armpits and lifted him right up in the air. Hey, put me down, will ya? He gasped. Bravura did put him down, saying cheerfully, That's settled then. Thanks for your unsolicited offer of hospitality. And giving Asterix another friendly slap, on the bottom this time, she walked happily off, leaving him incandescent with rage and in no state to report calmly when he got back to the village council.
Well, is she leaving?
Asked Vital Statistics hopefully. Asterix nearly exploded. That was a wild boar chase you sent me on, if you like. I've been conned, I have. Not only won't she leave the village, she's going to move into my hut.
I'm taking no further part in any of this. I'm off to move in with Obelix, and don't say I didn't warn you. That woman was trouble.
Back in the Gaulish village, Impedimenta was sitting outside the chief's hut with her embroidery frame, chatting to her new friend Bravura. "Well, Bravura, do you like it here in our village?" she asked. "Well, yes and no," said the bard. "Oh? What is it you don't like?" asked Impedimenta anxiously. "Well, look at you, for instance," said the bard. "You're the first lady of this village, and you aren't even on the village council. You sit there doing embroidery instead of taking the destiny of your people in hand." But vital statistics is the chief," said Impedimenta, rather shocked. "I dare say. And who knows best what the Gaulish woman really wants?" inquired Bravura. "You do, not that superannuated boor." Chief Vital Statistics, coming up at that moment, thought he heard her say something quite different from superannuated boor.
"Oh, what's that? Supper, marinated boar?"
he said hopefully. Bravura snorted.
"I'm off,"
she said. "Oh, don't go, Bravura," Impedimenta begged, but too late. Bravura had left, and only Vital Statistics followed as she went indoors, feeling cross.
"Now I wonder who's cooked a great big boar for her dear little Piggy Wiggy,"
said Vital Statistics fondly. Piggy Wiggy was Impedimenta's pet name for him when they were on good terms. It seemed they were not on good terms today. Impedimenta spun round on her heel.
"I am not your slave,"
she yelled at the surprised chief, and then added, rather more quietly,
"Come indoors. I have something to say to you."
"Oh, help! Oh, what have I gone and done this time?"
wondered poor Vital Statistics. Impedimenta scrambled up into his own ceremonial chair.
"Now you listen to me," she said. "From now on I shall sit on the village council too. I am the chief's wife, right?"
Right,"
said Vital Statistics, miffed.
"And I'm the chief around here!"
he shouted. A couple of villagers passing by heard unusual sounds of scuffling inside the chief's hut.
"Oh, yes,"
yelled a woman's voice.
"Oh, yes,"
a man's voice yelled back. Next moment, Vital Statistics burst out of the hut with a bundle and a black eye, shouting back over his shoulder,
"Okay, then, I'm leaving the village."
"Looks like Impedimenta hit the roof," said one of the passing villagers.
"Looks like that's not all she hit," said the other. At the village gates, the chief met Asterix, Obelix, and Dogmatix coming back from a successful boar hunt. "What on earth are you doing, Chief Vital Statistics?" asked Asterix.
"I'm the victim of a coup d'etat led by that wretched woman from Lutetia," snarled the chief, "and I'm going into political exile in the forest with Cacophonix. He had the right idea."
"Dear me," said Asterix in dismay. "Oh, come on, Obelix. We must warn Getafix." But it was rather late for that. Round the corner came all the village women, with Bravura scattering flowers and Impedimenta being carried on the ceremonial shield, and they were all shouting joyfully, "Long live Chief Impedimenta!"
"Hey, you!"
called Bravura, catching sight of the two friends.
"You with the wide stripes on your breeches! Fatso!"
What do you mean, fatso?"
said Obelix indignantly.
What do you mean, wide stripes?"
"Everyone's talents must be fully utilised in this village," said Bravura bossily. "In future you will go hunting and cook our new chief's meals."
Obelix scowled. If only she'd been a man, he thought.
"Oh, Asterix," he whispered, "I have this terrible urge to thump someone."
"Now keep calm, Obelix," said Asterix firmly. "You would never, never thump a woman, would you? Whatever she said. Now I think we'd better go and see Getafix." Getafix was busy brewing one of his potions, stirring it up in a big cauldron over the fire. He listened while Asterix told him about the latest political developments. "Vital Statistics is leaving too. This Bravura is a real risk to the happy atmosphere of our village."
True, sighed the Druid. "But the villagers are free to choose, Asterix. If they've decided they want Impedimenta as their chief, we must accept it. That's democracy."
Anyway, my stripes aren't that wide,
muttered Obelix, who was not much interested in democracy.
"I'm sure it was only a minority decision," said Asterix. "We must hold a referendum."
Asterix and Getafix had assembled the villagers outside the Druid's house. Getafix was holding an empty cask, and there were 2 piles of pebbles on a garden seat, one yellow and one white.
"We're going to take a free vote on whether Impedimenta or Vital Statistics is to be our chief," Asterix announced. "Each in turn," said the Druid solemnly. "We shall enter my hut and place a pebble in this cask to indicate our choice. White pebbles for Impedimenta, yellow pebbles for Vital Statistics."
Bravura began to feel a little worried. She wasn't sure Impedimenta would win in a secret ballot.
"Oh, why make it so complicated when a simple show of hands would do?" she said cheerfully. "All who want to vote by a show of hands, show their hands."
All the village women put their hands up. None of the men did.
"Right," said Asterix. "All who don't want to vote by a show of hands, show their hands."
Nobody put a hand up at all, except for Asterix himself. Obelix was scratching his head.
Asterix, I don't quite understand this show of hands business,
he admitted.
"I do," said Asterix grimly. "I call it a poor show, and I'm throwing in my hand."
He was marching off in a temper, but Bravura caught up with him.
"Now then, my proud little Gaul, don't be cross," she said. "I'm sure we can settle this amicably."
"You leave me alone," growled Asterix.
"Listen, did you ever think of settling down?" Bravura went on, unperturbed. "Mind your own business," snapped Asterix. "Because if so, I wouldn't mind settling down with you myself," suggested Bravura, blushing slightly.
That really did stop Asterix in his tracks.
"What?" he gasped. "We could do great things together," Bravura told him. "For instance, we could become chiefs of this village."
"Oh, yes," said Asterix, and now he really did lose his temper, for he had always been totally loyal to Vital Statistics.
"So that's your little game. You have designs on the chieftain's shield. Why, my proud little Gaul looks more handsome than ever when he's angry," said the infuriating Bravura, picking little Asterix right up off the ground again, and then, horror of horrors, planting a big kiss on his cheek. Oh, it was too much. Next moment Asterix had thumped her, just as if she were a Roman. Bravura toppled backwards, hit her head on the stone wall just behind her, and lay on the ground looking very groggy indeed, with a black eye forming. Asterix was horrified. "Oh, by all the gods! Oh, what have I done?" he said in remorse. "I struck a woman! Oh, and I was just telling Obelix we never do that! I can't believe it! Oh, it's not like me at all! I'm terribly sorry," he said, as the bard began to come round and he helped her to her feet. "Oh, honestly, I do apologise. It's the first time I ever—" Bravura was accepting no apologies. "In future, I'm steering clear of unscrupulous and shameless midgets," she said, striding off with a nasty look for Obelix and Dogmatix, who happened to be coming down the road. All 3 friends sat down by the roadside. Asterix still couldn't get over the dreadful thing he had done. "Oh, this is terrible, Obelix," he said. "I'm so ashamed. Oh, I don't know what came over me. Oh, I struck a woman."
"Oh, that certainly can't be as much fun as thumping a Roman,"
Obelix agreed. And there was worse to come. Soon the Druid joined them.
"Asterix," he said, "I'm afraid Impedimenta has summoned you to appear before the village council this very day to answer charges brought against you by Bravura."
"I've a feeling I shall soon have to leave the village myself," said Asterix, as he rose to go to the chief's hut.
"Don't worry," said Getafix. "I will personally undertake your defence against this dangerous and unprincipled new bard. Trust me, Asterix."
But even the Druid, it seemed, could do nothing. Backed up by Bravura and the rest of the women who now made up the village council, Impedimenta pronounced sentence.
Asterix, you've broken our laws by maltreating our guest. You've brought Gaulish gallantry into disrepute. We therefore sentence you to temporary exile from the village.
Oh, marvellous, said the Druid sarcastically. So, the person who has destroyed the harmony of our village is on the council, he added, pointing to Bravura, while the hero who has done so much to safeguard our liberties is banished. Oh, brilliant.
Who needs heroes? Bravura snapped back. It would be more sensible to extend the hand of friendship to the legions who so generously offer us the benefits of Roman civilization.
At the mere idea of giving in to Julius Caesar, even the Druid lost his temper.
So who needs your advice, you viper? He shouted.
And who needs your cauldron, you decrepit old owl? Bravura shouted back.
Very well, said Getafix grimly, wrapping his cloak around him. In the circumstances, then, I am leaving the village.
And he strode out. This was a dramatic announcement indeed. Even if its full import didn't seem to bother Bravura, the other village women began to have serious doubts. They got together in a huddle.
We've upset our Druid, they said. Perhaps we shouldn't have been so hard on Asterix. Suppose the Romans attack. However shall we manage without magic potion? Have no fear, Bravura told them. The Romans won't refuse the peace deal I'm going to offer them.
But Impedimenta just sat there, suddenly looking less sure of herself and biting her nails. Meanwhile, Asterix and Getafix went to pack up their bundles. "We're letting Bravura off lightly leaving the village," said Asterix, feeling anxious about the villagers they were leaving behind.
"Of course, but we'll keep a close watch on developments," the Druid said.
Next moment, Obelix and Dogmatix caught up with them. They were coming too. As the four of them walked through the village, they noticed that all the shops were shut up. Unhygienix, the fishmonger, had a closed notice on his stall. Fully Automatix, the blacksmith, had a closed notice on his forge.
"You know, I'm surprised by the apathy and indifference of the men in the village," said Asterix.
"Put yourself in their place, Asterix," said Getafix tolerantly. "You and I are bachelors. The others have family ties to think of."
But as the four friends walked out through the village gates, they stared in surprise. There were all the other men of the village, with their bundles, just waiting for Asterix and the others.
"One against all, and all for one," they shouted cheerfully.
"You go home, son,"
Unhygienix told his little boy, who wanted to come too.
"It's always the same," the little boy grumbled. "The grown-ups get all the fun."
But he did as he was told. And it wasn't bad fun either. The men of the village found a good place in the forest to camp, and were soon having a good picnic dinner of roast boar. Poor Cacophonix was tied to a tree and gagged, as usual at banquets, so that he couldn't sing and make it rain.
"We are not too badly off here, while we wait for our good ladies to see sense," Vital Statistics said.
"But we must be on our guard," Getafix warned, "in case the Romans take their chance to capture the village."
"Obelix and I'll go to the camp of Aquarium and keep watch on them," Asterix told the others, and he and Obelix and Dogmatix set off. It wasn't a bad idea to go and keep watch on the Romans, because a little earlier the galley from Rome with Caesar's secret weapon on board had come ashore not far from the fortified camp of Aquarium. In Aquarium itself, yet another patrol of legionaries had come back to report after scouting in the forest. They'd been keeping watch on Cacophonix. As a result, so much rain had fallen on them that they'd caught dreadful colds.
"The Gauls have got a formidable and dangerous weapon,"
their leader told the centurion.
"It's their wretched bard, who can only sing so badly that he brings down the wrath of the gods,"
said another soldier. The other soldiers sneezed. Their sympathetic centurion couldn't bring himself to tear them off another strip. He shook his head. "It'll be great relief when the relief gets here," he assured them.
"The relief is here, centurion,"
said a voice behind him. The centurion turned to find himself facing the patrician Manlius Clapamomnibus.
"By Jupiter," he said,
Are you the relief?" he inquired. One rather unimpressive-looking man didn't see much in the way of troops to relieve his garrison. "So to speak," said Clapham Omnibus briskly. "My orders from Caesar are to tell you to leave camp before the relief relieves you." "And suppose I refuse to leave camp before the relief relieves us?" asked the centurion, who didn't like being told what to do by a civilian, even a patrician. Manlius Clapham Omnibus was ready for that one. "Then you'll be relieved of your duties, and go to relieve the monotony of the diet of the lions in the Circus Maximus," he said. Without a moment's hesitation, the centurion turned and gave his men the order. "We are leaving the camp." Clapham Omnibus strolled down the shore to his ship. "Right," he shouted to whatever or whoever was inside. "Disembark in an orderly and disciplined manner." And out came an amazing sight. A whole troop of female Roman legionaries, led by a large, beefy woman centurion with black corkscrew curls. They'd been cooped up below decks for days and days, and they couldn't wait to breathe some fresh air. As they were also highly trained soldiers, they couldn't wait to get at someone to fight either. It seemed as if they had mistaken Clapham Omnibus for the enemy, because they charged right over him, knocking him to the ground as they uttered their war cry. "I said," protested Clapham Omnibus feebly, as he tried struggling to his feet, while a number of feet shod in elegant battle sandals trampled over him. "I said in an orderly and disciplined manner." He might as well not have bothered. But once the women legionaries met the centurion from the camp of Aquarium, just leading his men out to evacuate the camp, their centurion shouted, "Halt!" and they halted. The legionaries from Aquarium couldn't believe their eyes. What kind of a joke is this?" asked the centurion. "We've come to relieve you, jokers, that's what," the beefy woman centurion told him. The centurion from Aquarium and his men looked at the women and fell about laughing. Chuckled the centurion, inspecting the women soldiers in their green tunics and shiny helmets and breastplates. "Talk about raising the morale of the troops, dressed to kill, too." "Oh, do stop it, centurion," gasped one of the men, helpless with mirth. "This is killing me." The centurion himself was laughing so hard that when the woman centurion advanced on him, swept him off his feet with one swift movement, and sent him flying in the air, he literally didn't know what had hit him until he landed back on the ground, head first, with a mighty thump. Then the women soldiers made for the garrison of Aquarium. They'd all been taught the ancient Roman versions of judo and similar martial arts, and they made very short work indeed of the legionaries. Asterix was watching in the shelter of some bushes, astonished by the sight. "By Tutatis, Obelix, do you see what I see?" he asked.
"You bet," said Obelix disapprovingly. "The Romans are thumping each other. That's not fair. They aren't leaving any for us." Dogmatics growled in sympathy. The patrician Manlius Clapham Omnibus was horrified by this outbreak of civil war. Stop it at once!" he shouted. By now, in fact, all the men were lying flattened on the ground, so the fight had stopped anyway. "This is a fine performance by the Roman army, I must say," the patrician went on. "You don't even need Gauls to fight now. How they'd laugh if they could see you." "I don't see anything to laugh about," grumbled Obelix from his hiding place. "I thought I told you to leave the camp of Aquarium," Clapham Omnibus told the dazed commander of the garrison. "I don't get it," said the centurion, baffled. "What exactly is the idea of all this?" "Come over here," said Clapham Omnibus, leading him aside to a place which happened to be quite near Asterix's hiding place. "I'll tell you all about it. You see, I had this brilliant idea. Recruit a century of women to fight the Gauls, and then we'll defeat them and occupy their village at long last." "You think your secret weapon will succeed where we've failed, do you?" said the centurion, scowling.
Yes, chuckled Manlius Clappermumdius. You see, the Gauls are famous for their chivalry and gallantry to ladies, and that will prevent the villagers from fighting women, even women in uniform. Finally the centurion saw the point. It wasn't a bad idea after all. I get it, he said. Right, we'll leave camp. Oh, no, you won't, said the patrician firmly. Now you know the secret. You're all confined to barracks.
Asterix had overheard all this. He and Obelix hurried off to rejoin the other men of the village and warn them what was up. It really is a cunning plan, he told Vital Statistics and the others. If we fight these women legionaries, we shall be dishonoured. If we don't, they'll occupy the village.
By Tutatis, said Vital Statistics in alarm. We must warn our good ladies of the danger threatening them. I want a volunteer to go to the village.
But one by one the men refused to volunteer.
Me go back to the village? Never,
said Unhygienics the fishmonger.
My wife might think I'd just been looking for some excuse to go home,
said Fully Automatics the blacksmith.
I can imagine all those dirty dishes waiting to be washed,
said Geriatrix, the oldest inhabitant.
One has one's pride,
remarked another Gaul, and that just about summed up the general feeling. For some reason, everyone began staring at Asterix.
Oh, okay. I get the idea. It's up to me as usual, he said gloomily. Come on, Obelix.
As the two friends approached the village, they were surprised not to see anyone around.
By Tutatis, the place looks deserted, said Asterix.
It's the cacophonix effect,
said Obelix.
His singing makes all the forest boars run away. Bravura's a bard too. I bet she's put the women to flight. These bards are crazy.
Coming round a corner, however, they met the village children, dressed up as soldiers and playing a lovely game of Gauls and Romans, using sticks for weapons and saucepans for armour. Asterix made a beeline for the fishmonger's son, the little boy with the lisp. "Hey, where are all the village women?" he asked.
"They're all at school," said the little boy happily. "Us children aren't having lessons anymore. It's great."
Well, this was puzzling. It got even more puzzling as Asterix and Obelix came closer to the school and heard a lot of clapping and shouts of bravo. Then they saw that all the village ladies were sitting at the school desks. A platform had been set up in front of the desks, and models, wearing dresses in the very latest fashion, were parading along this improvised catwalk while Bravura gave a running commentary. One of the models wore a headdress that looked rather like a menhir, although much smaller than any of Obelix's menhirs, and another had a miniature dolman on her head.
"And still in the Diorix collection, after the Menhir Rose outfit, we present the dreamy dolman evening dress," Bravura announced.
All the ladies clapped again.
"This is really weird," said Asterix.
Stepping up behind Mrs. Fully Automatics, who was in the back row with her daughter, he asked,
"Hey, what's going on?"
"Bravura's brought some famous fashion designers from Lutetia to present their spring collections," said Mrs. Fully Automatics, without stopping to think.
Then she registered the male voice and turned round in surprise.
"Why, it's Asterix!"
Next moment the ladies had turned their backs on the fashion show and were clustering around Asterix full of questions.
"Oh, where are our husbands? What are they doing? How are they? When are they coming home?"
Asterix was touched. He realized the men and women of the village still loved each other, really. How sweet. Bravura was not at all touched, but distinctly cross.
"Ah,"
she snorted, looking at the Gaulish women.
"Slaves you were, and slaves you will remain."
However, Impedimenta took no notice. She called for order.
"Quiet, please. Asterix may have something to tell us." I'm sorry to interrupt the show," said Asterix, picking up his helmet, which had been knocked off in all the confusion, "but, Vital Statistics sent me to tell you that—"
Impedimenta interrupted.
"The council will meet in my hut to hear what that great boor Vital Statistics has to tell us."
Soon afterwards, Asterix was finishing his story. "So, you see,
Caesar has discovered the weakness of the Gauls. Facing those women legionaries, we men are helpless.
I know someone who wasn't always so scrupulous, muttered Bravura, looking darkly at Asterix. Or so chivalrous and gallant either.
But the other women were ready for anything.
Then we'll fight the women legionaries ourselves, they said, and beat them too, with the aid of the magic potion.
I hope it isn't fattening, said Mrs. Geriatrix, a little doubtfully.
Magic potion? We don't need any magic potion, said Bravura loftily. I shall go and see those Roman matrons myself. We can easily agree on a peace plan, woman to woman.
All the same, said Impedimenta, I'd like the other village women warned. And just as Asterix and Obelix were leaving, she called them back in an undertone. Wait a minute, you two. Can you tell me how my piggy-wiggy is, Asterix? I do hope he hasn't caught cold. It's so damp in the forest at this time of year. Would you take him these warm clothes? Oh, and remind him that he's liable to get an attack of the gout if he overeats. As the two friends passed the fishmonger's hut, Bacteria called out to them too. Here, Asterix. She produced a couple of blankets. Tell unhygienics to wrap up well. Nights are so chilly in the forest. Next came a sheepskin waistcoat for fully automatics, handed out of their hut by his wife, a pile of warm clothes for geriatrics, and so on. All the wives wanted to send their husbands blankets, winter woolies, and long johns. It was almost too much even for Obelix to carry, but at last he and Asterix arrived back at the camp in the forest.
"Well, Asterix, what news have you brought back from the village?"
asked Vital Statistics. "Not much news, I'm afraid," said Asterix, pointing to Obelix, almost invisible behind his load, "but any amount of warm woolies and good advice." Meanwhile, the women legionaries had pitched their tents near the fortified camp of Aquarium, and Bravura was on her way to visit them. Asterix and Obelix spotted her while they were out scouting in the forest. "Hey, it's Bravura. She must be going to the Roman camp. Let's follow her," said Asterix. They saw Bravura walk up to the handsome, raven-haired woman legionary on sentry duty outside the women's camp.
"Halt the Gaul!"
shouted the Roman. Bravura did not halt. She strode forward, holding out her hand.
"You're a woman too," she said, accurately enough. "That makes us sisters. So let's shake hands, Roman."
Next moment, she had been knocked off her feet by a mighty punch from the Roman sentry. As we were saying, all the women legionaries had been trained in the martial arts.
"Oh, that Roman sister wasn't very gallant,"
remarked Obelix, watching. The patrician Manlius Clapham Omnibus emerged from his tent.
"What brings you here, Gaulish woman?"
he asked.
"I came to offer peace between Rome and the village of the indomitable Gauls, and this is the kind of welcome I get," said Bravura crossly.
Manlius Clapham Omnibus sniggered.
"So the indomitable Gauls are surrendering. I never thought it would be so quick and easy." "The indomitable Gauls are not surrendering," said Bravura, even more crossly. "It's their women who want peace."
"Ah, yes," said Clapham Omnibus sarcastically.
"I'll have no truck with your proposals, woman. The village will be destroyed, and its people will end their days as prisoners in Rome."
Watching from his hiding place, Asterix was pleased to see that Bravura wasn't a collaborator after all, because she gave Clapham Omnibus an almighty punch which sent him reeling, turned on her heel, and marched away, shouting, "You're nothing but a lot of barbarians!"
"You know, suddenly I like our new bard a lot better," murmured Asterix.
"See you later, Obelix. I want a word with Bravura." And leaving Obelix to go on ahead, he came out of hiding and met Bravura accidentally on purpose in the forest.
"Congratulations on your courage, Bravura," he said.
Bravura was still fuming.
"Those Romans! What a set of oafs!" she said. "They're beneath our contempt."
"How right you are!" Asterix flattered her.
"Listen, I guess you know your way around Lutetia?"
"I do," said Bravura. "Why do you ask?"
"Because, this time," said Asterix, "it's my turn to make you a proposition."
And he made it. We shall have to wait a little while to discover just what it was,
But by the time he and Bravura had discussed it, they were on very friendly terms. "We're agreed then, Bravura?" said Asterix, as they shook hands. "Absolutely agreed, Asterix," said Bravura. Meanwhile, in the women legionaries' camp, Manlius Clapham Omnibus was asking their beefy centurion, "Well, what's your plan for occupying the Gaulish village?" If he was expecting something fiendishly cunning, he was disappointed. "Easy," said the centurion cheerfully. "I barge in and I occupy it. But I'll send a patrol out scouting first, to be on the safe side. You never know." And she picked 4 of her best women. "You're to go through the forest and approach the Gaulish village," she told them. "Come back and report all you see." The 4 Roman women marched bravely off. After they'd gone a little way into the forest, however, 3 of them weren't feeling quite so brave. I'm sure there are loads of creepy crawlies in this forest," said one. "I just can't stand snakes and spiders," said another. "Maybe there are wolves too," said the third. "Oh, come on, why not a dragon while we're about it?" said the leader of the patrol, who was braver than the rest. Asterix, who was stalking them in cover, suddenly had an idea. Cacophonix. The bard's music could be relied on first to make it pour with rain, then to bring all the forest birds and animals out of their nests, dens and holes, and run for their lives. He raced off to the bard's treetop house in the forest. "Hey, Cacophonix!" he yelled up at the bard. "Quick, sing something!" "What did you say?" said the astonished bard as he climbed down from his house. Asterix's request was unusual, to say the least. "Are you joking? Or do you really mean it?" "I really mean it," Asterix assured him. "Well, what a lucky coincidence," said the bard, beaming and playing an out-of-tune trill on his lyre. "I've just finished composing an entirely new kind of ode. Listen to this and tell me what you think." Asterix had taken the precaution of putting his hands firmly over his ears to keep the sound out. No one had warned the patrol of Roman women, however. As Cacophonix plucked his lyre and wailed wordlessly at the top of his truly appalling singing voice, and the full horror of the sound hit them, it almost knocked them off their feet. Then the rain came down heavily, and then the birds and animals came out and ran for it, snakes, creepy crawlies, wolves, and all. At last the performance was over. Cacophonix and Asterix were both dripping wet. "Oof!" gasped the bard. "Oh, there. Well, what do you say? It's an anacreontic ode transcending the verbal dimension. I am rather proud of it, I must say." "Yes, well, it's frightfully impressive," Asterix told him. "Really effective. Yeah, oh, well done. yeah, I'll be back quite soon for an encore, Cacophonix." By now the 4 women soldiers were back in camp, reporting to the centurion. "It started with a horrible howl," said the first legionary, "followed by a downpour which brought out snakes and spiders," said the second. "And even the wolves," said the third. "I'm sure there's a dragon in that forest," said the once brave patrol leader, who really believed it by now. And they all stood there with the water pouring off them. "Oh, stop being such drips," yelled the centurion. "Right, I'm sending off another patrol." Regular as clockwork, patrol followed patrol, and regular as clockwork, Cacophonix began singing, downpour followed downpour, and more animals escaped from the forest. Day followed miserable day, until both the Romans and the Gaulish villagers were wet and miserable, and the Gauls had caught nasty colds. Obelix couldn't even light a fire to cook the boar he had caught, and as he pointed out to the others, it was the last boar in the forest. "Asterix, I wish you'd tell us why this sudden strange enthusiasm for Cacophonix's music," said Getafix the Druid, wringing rainwater out of his long white beard. "I needed time to set up my plan," said Asterix mysteriously, but he still refused to tell the others what the plan was. "Just trust me a little longer," he said. "I want you to wait for me near the village, keeping under cover, and whatever happens, don't intervene, huh? Obelix and I still have a few things to do. Come on, Obelix." Obelix had no idea what the plan was either, but anything Asterix wanted was fine by him. The 2 friends, with dogmatics, were soon approaching the camp of Roman women. The blonde sentry on duty outside pointed her spear at them. "Halt! You shall not pass, Gauls!" she shouted. "Be gallant, Obelix, you understand?" whispered Asterix. Usually, of course, Obelix would have knocked a Roman sentry up into the air. However, since this one was a woman, he just flicked a spear up in the air instead, snapping it like a twig.
"Excuse me, lady,"
he said, picking her up very gently and tucking her under one arm.
"Is this gallant enough, Asterix?"
he asked anxiously as they walked into the camp. "Just right, Obelix," his friend told him.
"Put me down, will you?"
yelled the infuriated blonde sentry. "Guards, help!" Her friends, led by the beefy centurion, came rushing out of their tents.
"What's all this, Gauls?"
asked the centurion. Manlius Clappermumdibus was lurking behind her, quivering with fright at the sight of two indomitable Gauls.
"Don't forget, your laws forbid you to fight women,"
he reminded them. "Precisely," said Asterix. "We want to welcome you ladies to our village with all due respect, and then the sun will shine again too."
"Nothing doing," snapped the beefy woman centurion. "Even if we have to face more of Jupiter's thunderbolts, we will crush your village."
"Oh, in that case, here you are," said Asterix cheerfully, and Obelix tossed the blonde sentry over to the centurion with another polite,
"Excuse me, lady."
He and Asterix blew loud raspberries at the centurion and Clappermumdibus before turning and running off, pursued by a hail of Roman spears. And then they went to find Cacophonix. This time, much to his disappointment, he was not asked to sing. Asterix and Obelix gagged him and tied him to a tree, and then hid behind it. It was just like the old days. Soon all the Roman women legionaries were making their way through the forest, followed by Manlius Clappermumdibus, keeping well behind the women because he didn't think Gaulish chivalry and gallantry would extend to him. However, he was sure that he would soon conquer the Gaulish village with his secret weapon.
"Oh, won't the Caesar be grateful?" he thought gleefully. "I expect he'll make me a senator."
When the Roman women reached the village, their centurion delivered a short speech.
"Women, show these Gaulish barbarians the true strength of the Roman legions. Show them our ability to fight with order and discipline."
"Charge!" she shouted, drawing her sword, and all the women charged, uttering their fearsome war cry. They yelled as they burst into the village, and then suddenly everything went perfectly quiet. "Dear me," thought Clappermumdibus, lurking outside the village fence. "Why this sudden silence? I do hope the Gauls have been gallant." He peered through the gateway, and an amazing sight met his eyes. The first thing the Roman women had seen, obviously, was an enormous carved slab bearing the words, "Welcome to our great trade fortnight. Top-quality goods from Lutetia." And there were stalls everywhere, stocked with pretty, tempting merchandise. A sign over one stall said it sold jewellery. Several of the women soldiers were clustering around a stall advertising Lutetian lingerie. Two were having their hair done and their nails manicured at a hairdresser's salon, and several others were dabbing samples of expensive Lutetian perfume on their wrists. Impedimenta was running a stall with the latest Lutetian fashions. "Unrepeatable bargain prices," she shouted, holding up her wares. It was more than Manlius Clappermumdibus could stand. He ran into the village, tearing what little hair he had left. "Centurion!" he shouted.
"Ah, just the man I want,"
said the beefy centurion, who was holding an outsized pink dress.
"Do you think this one would suit me, eh? It doesn't make me look fat, does it?"
"Stop this nonsense!" shouted Clappermumdibus.
"I order you to—"
He'd been going to say fight, but by the time he got the word out, he'd been flattened by the Roman women racing by and knocking him down as they uttered their war cry again. They had heard Bravura, who was running a leather handbag stall, shouting, 50% discount on all purchases. What a bargain! Who could resist? They took no notice at all of poor Clappermumdibus as he struggled to his feet and tried ordering them to fight again. Finally, nursing several bruises, he staggered out of the village, muttering,
"This is a disaster! They'll shop till they drop, and Caesar will be furious."
Now, at last, the villagers understood the plan Asterix and Bravura had thought up between them. All those opportunities to buy top Lutetian fashions had taken the minds of the Roman women legionaries right off such unimportant things as fighting Gauls. However, poor Obelix suddenly burst into tears. He sobbed.
I'm no more use. You don't need me to thump Romans anymore. I'm not wanted.
Oh, yes, you are, Obelix, said Asterix firmly. Come on, we're going to keep an eye on that Roman who was with the women. I'm sure he's gone to get help from the camp of Aquarium. And don't forget, Aquarium is still full of legionaries, male legionaries.
Not covered by Gaulish gallantry,
said Obelix, cheering up. Definitely not covered by Gaulish gallantry, said Asterix.
Oh, well, then let's get down to business,
said Obelix, and they started out for Aquarium.
Meanwhile, Chief Vital Statistics decided, the rest of us will see to the other fortified camps surrounding the village. I hope we won't run out of magic potion. Get a fix?
Oh, don't worry, said the Druid. All we ever run out of is a bit of common sense.
By now, Manlius Clapamomnibus had reached the camp of Aquarium and was knocking on the gates.
This is Manlius Clapamomnibus on Julius Caesar's business, he shouted.
What about?
Asked the centurion's unencouraging voice from inside.
That's enough of questions, shouted Clapamomnibus. I order you to go and occupy the Gaulish village.
It can't be done, said the centurion. We're confined to barracks, right? You said so.
Look here, centurion, said the patrician. Listen carefully. Those cowardly Gauls have abandoned their village. It's occupied only by their womenfolk, and their womenfolk are larking around with those half-witted women legionaries. Here's your chance to win fame and fortune.
You really mean it? Said the centurion, finally opening the gate. There's no one in the village but the women? He turned and shouted to his men in the camp behind him. Get armed! Get the move on! Get to the Gaulish village! Unfortunately, and just as they came surging out, Asterix and Obelix arrived. All those Romans looked as good as a birthday present to Obelix.
Oh, goody, goody,
he said. They're all yours, Obelix, Asterix told him. Next moment, the centurion and his men, who knew Obelix only too well, had turned and were racing back into the camp, slamming the gate and leaving Clapamomnibus outside.
Don't touch me, whatever you do,
he gasped, nose to nose with Obelix.
I am an envoy of Julius Caesar, he gabbled, and maybe we should discuss the situation calmly, like the civilized folk we are, with a view to...
But here Obelix, with great relish, knocked him out of his Roman sandals and sky high. Then, with one gentle push of his foot, he kicked the gate down, and soon he was inside the camp, thumping Romans right, left, and centre. Asterix left it all to him. Good old Obelix, he said, propping his chin in his hands as he lay on the grass outside the camp, watching the display of Romans flying through the air. He's been feeling rather left out of this adventure. Yeah, I owed him some fun. Finally, Obelix emerged, a very happy Gaulish warrior, leaving heaps of battered Romans groaning and complaining. Asterix was a little surprised to see the palisades and watchtowers of the camp still standing. You know, I'd have expected you to flatten this Roman camp completely, he said.
A Roman camp?
Said Obelix innocently, as suddenly the entire structure of Aquarium crashed to the ground behind him.
What Roman camp was that?
Out in the forest, Getafix was brewing magic potion, and the men of the village were taking a dose apiece to help them tackle the other Roman camps. Poor Cacophonix was tied to a tree again.
I'm sorry, Cacophonix, Getafix apologized, but your voice might curdle the potion.
Chief Vital Statistics made one of his rousing speeches.
Villagers, proud and noble warriors, once again we find ourselves obliged to confront our mortal enemy. The anxious gaze of the ancient world is turned upon your powerful breasts, ready as you are to combat a dictatorship which will even attack women and children."
He finished tamely, suddenly noticing that the Gauls had got bored with his speech and set off without waiting for the end. Meanwhile, Manlius Clapamomnibus was on his way to the fortified camp of Totorum. He was much the worse for wear. His head was tied up in a bandage, his smart green cloak was tattered, he'd lost his sandals, and he was leaning on a crutch. No wonder the centurion commanding Totorum looked at him in some surprise when he arrived, and commented, "You look rather ruffled, patrician." When Clapamomnibus had told his news, a gleam came into the centurion's eye. He too liked the idea of occupying the Gaulish village and winning Caesar's approval. "Well, well, so the cowardly Gauls have abandoned their village, leaving only women and children to guard it." "That's right," said Manlius Clapamomnibus, and strictly speaking, that was right. But next moment a sentry shouted, "Raise the alarm! The Gauls are attacking!"
"Charge, boys!"
shouted Vital Statistics.
"Leave them to me! Leave them to me!"
yelled Obelix. "Don't be so selfish, Obelix," said Asterix. "You've had plenty already." In fact, there were enough for everyone. Once they'd flattened the camp of Totorum, the Gauls, well fortified by the magic potion, went on to deal with the camp of Laudanum and the camp of Compendium in the same way. The Gaulish attack took the Romans entirely by surprise. And by now, back in the village itself, the Gaulish ladies and the Roman women legionaries were the best of friends. The Romans had had a marvellous time trying on all the latest fashions from Lutetia, and they were planning to create a sensation when they got home. "Oh, look at this lovely outfit," said one happily. "They'll be green with envy in the Forum." "When I get back to Rome, I'm going to open a shop called High Fashion of Lutetia," said another. "I'm going to book time in the arena for fashion shows in the intervals of gladiatorial contests," said a third. "It will be brilliant. I will make a fortune." The beefy woman centurion had decided on an outsized purple dress instead of the pink one. She shook hands warmly with Impedimenta. "Thanks again for your kind hospitality." Little did the Roman women know, as they happily strolled through the forest to embark on their ship, that Cacophonix was up in a tree getting ready to sing. "Alone at last," he said happily. "Now I can polish up my latest ode." And he launched into it. The effect was even worse than before, if possible. A mighty thunderstorm immediately broke out. The Roman women's new dresses and leggings were all drenched. So were their new hairdos. There wasn't much animal life left in the forest to run away by this time, but one last survivor, a huge green dragon, who had been sticking it out grimly in his lair, fled for the sea too. "I knew there was a dragon in that forest somewhere," said the legionary who had suspected it all along, hitching a lift on the dragon's tail. They all boarded the ship, including the dragon who perched on the end of the deck, and set sail for Rome immediately, leaving poor Manlius Clapamomnibus on the quayside shouting, "Wait for me! Wait for me!" After all this excitement, the Gaulish villagers enjoyed a happy reunion. The men were delighted to see their wives and children again. Their wives and children were delighted to see them too. Impedimenta handed the ceremonial shield back to Vital Statistics. "Here, Piggy, she said. "It suits you better than me."
You can use it whenever you like, Pedimenta," said the chief, shyly handing her a big bunch of blue flowers he had picked in the forest. Asterix and Bravura shook hands. "No hard feelings, Bravura?" asked Asterix. "No hard feelings, Asterix," she assured him. And all ended happily. Even in Rome, where the tale of the secret weapon had now been told, and a certain cheerfulness seemed to have taken over the city, or most of it, because, just as Julius Caesar had foretold, he was the laughing-stock of Rome, so he wasn't particularly happy himself. The Gaulish villagers held their traditional banquet in the middle of the village, with Bravura and the Gaulish women as guests of honour. After all,
They had played the main part in defending the village. Even Cacophonix was allowed to join the banquet for once, so long as he didn't sing, because he had been a good secret weapon too. "I hope you enjoyed your stay here, Bravura," said Asterix politely. "Yes, but I must get back to Lutetia soon," said Bravura. "And to make things up to your bard, I've promised to take him with me and introduce him to the great Lutetian impresario, Ziegfeld Folix."
"I just can't wait to be grown up and have fun,"
said Unhygienix's son, the little boy with the lisp, watching the banqueters enviously.
"Me too,"
said his friend, the little girl, fully Automatix's daughter.
"And when I'm grown up, I'm going to be your chief."
Come to think of it, perhaps Bravura had left some interesting new ideas in the Gaulish village after all.